The night was quiet, in a way that only the desert could manage to quiet, like it was holding its breath. Gabriela rode low over her mare's neck, guiding her through mesquite and scrub with nothing but moonlight and memory. She knew this land. She knew where men cut corners, where cruelty hid behind fences and claimed it was tradition. The ranch lay ahead, a dark sprawl of corrals and low buildings. Gabriela slowed, listening. Horses shifted restlessly inside the pens, their soft knickers carrying on the breeze. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. It never got easier, no matter how many times she did this. She dismounted silently and moved toward the fence. Up close, she could see the damage raw marks on flanks, ribs showing beneath dull coats, fear shining in wide eyes. Her jaw tightened. These animals had worked themselves half to death. And for what? Pride, greed. Men who believed ownership meant permission. Gabriela slipped inside the corral and began her work. She spoke softly, soothing the horses as she loosened knots and cut ropes. She chose 3, as she always did. Strong enough to travel, broken enough to need saving. One bay pressed its head against her chest, trembling. She rested her forehead against his and breathed. "I've got you," she whispered. The gate creaked open just enough to let them through. Gabriela mounted bareback, leading the others behind her. They slipped into the desert like shadows, hooves muffled by sand. By the time a lantern flared in the ranch house, she was already gone. At first light, Sheriff Daniel Cole stood where the horses had been. He crouched, fingers brushing the dirt, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. 3 sets of tracks, clean cuts on the ropes, no panic. Whoever had done this knew horses and knew how to move, unseen. "She's back," he said quietly. Daniel straightened and scanned the horizon. He'd heard every version of the story. A thief who stole only abused horses. A woman who rode like the wind and vanished before dawn. Some townsfolk praised her. Others demanded she be hanged. Daniel had never seen her, but he'd followed her work across counties like a trail of unanswered questions. Stolen property was stolen property. Still, something about the care in those tracks unsettled him. Later that afternoon, the heat shimmered over Mesa Roja as Gabriela rode into town. She wore a man's shirt, dust-stained trousers, and her hair was braided tight down her back. No one paid her much mind. That was the point. She led the horses to a quiet barn on the edge of town where an older man waited. He inspected the animals carefully, his face darkening at the marks on their bodies. "They'll be safe," he promised. Gabriela nodded as he pressed coins into her palm. She didn't count them. As she stepped back onto the street, a voice stopped her. "That your riding horse." She turned. The man before her wore a badge and a calm expression that didn't reach his eyes. He was taller than she expected, his presence solid, unmovable. A lawman who looked like he belonged to the land he protected. "Yes," she said evenly. "You ride well," he replied. "Not many do. Not many notice." A corner of his mouth twitched. "I notice things. Sheriff Daniel Cole." "Gabriela," she said, offering nothing more. Daniel studied her, something unreadable passing through his gaze. "You're passing through, for now. Be careful," he said. "Mesa Roja has rules." "So does the desert," she answered. "And it doesn't forgive cruelty." Their eyes held for a heartbeat too long. Then Gabriela tipped her hat and walked away. Pulse steady, but fast. Daniel watched her go, unease settling in his chest. Somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't just another stranger riding through town. This was the beginning of trouble. The sun climbed high over Mesa Roja, burning away the cool quiet of morning and replacing it with dust and noise. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the report in front of him without reading it. 3 stolen horses, same pattern as before. Same care, same silence. And the same woman wouldn't leave his thoughts. He told himself it was coincidence, that passing riders came through every week. Still, something about Gabriela's steady gaze and the way she spoke about the desert lingered with him. Experience had taught him to trust his instincts, even when they led somewhere uncomfortable. By late afternoon, he found her again. Gabriela stood at the livery stable, brushing down her mare with slow, deliberate strokes. The horse leaned into her touch, eyes half closed, utterly at ease. Daniel paused at the entrance, observing. A thief might rush. A criminal might hide. Gabriela did neither. "You take good care of her," he said. She didn't look up. "She takes care of me." That usually goes both ways. She finally turned, brush still in hand. "Is there a reason the sheriff keeps showing up where I am?" "Town's small," Daniel replied. "Paths cross." "Funny," she said lightly. "Feels more like following." Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "I ask questions when things don't add up. And do I not add up?" He considered her carefully. "You don't." Gabriela set the brush aside. "Then maybe your questions are wrong." Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken challenge. Daniel shifted his weight. "You hear about the ranch outside town, Harper Place?" "I hear plenty," she said. "Mostly from people who don't want to look too close. 3 horses were taken last night." Her jaw tightened just slightly. "I'm surprised anyone noticed. That's a bold thing to say." "Is it?" Gabriela stepped closer. "You've seen those horses, haven't you? Scarred, starved, worked until they break." Daniel didn't answer. He had seen them. That was the problem. "The law doesn't move fast enough," she continued. "So the animals pay the price." "Then theft fixes that?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "Action does." Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. He should have shut the conversation down, should have warned her, maybe even arrested her. Instead, he found himself asking, "What happens to them?" "They go somewhere safe," Gabriela replied. "Pasture, water, no whips. And you?" "I move on." The simplicity of it struck him. "You know I can't ignore this." "I know," she said. "That's why I don't ask you to." For a moment, Daniel saw not a criminal, but a woman carrying a burden no one else would touch. It unsettled him more than open defiance ever could. That night, Daniel rode patrol along the outskirts of town. The desert stretched endlessly, stars sharp and bright above him. He thought about rules, about justice, about the thin line between right and lawful. Miles away, Gabriela prepared to leave Mesa Rocha. She tightened her saddle and paused, glancing once toward town. She hadn't planned on staying. She never did. But the lawman's eyes followed her into the dark. And for the first time in a long while, Gabriela wondered what it would cost to keep riding away. Some lines, once crossed, could never be erased, and both of them had already stepped too close. The storm rolled in without warning, a wall of dark clouds swallowing the horizon by late afternoon. Wind tore across the open land, bending scrub low and driving sand into the air. Daniel had just finished securing the jail doors when the first crack of thunder split the sky. He mounted up immediately. Storms scattered travelers, spooked horses, and turned familiar ground dangerous. As sheriff, it was his responsibility to ride anyway. Miles outside town, through sheets of rain and whipping wind, Daniel spotted a lone rider fighting to keep control. The horse slipped hooves, scrambling in the mud, and then both horse and rider went down hard. Daniel cursed and urged his horse forward. Gabriela pushed herself up, breath sharp in her chest, rain plastering her hair to her face. Her mare struggled to rise, trembling. Gabriela grabbed the reins, murmuring soothing words, even as pain flared along her side. Then she heard hoofbeats. She looked up and saw Daniel dismounting, already moving toward her. "I've got it," she said quickly. "You're hurt," he replied, kneeling beside the horse. "I said, I've got it. Humor me." They worked together in silence, rain soaking them both. Daniel checked the mare's leg carefully before helping her stand. When the horse steadied, he turned his attention to Gabriela. "You're limping. It'll pass. Sit," he ordered gently. She glared at him, then surprised herself by obeying. They took shelter beneath a rock overhang as the storm raged, thunder echoing through the canyon. For a moment, neither spoke. "You shouldn't be riding in weather like this," Daniel said, at last. You shouldn't be chasing ghosts, he sighed. You know why I'm here. Yes, she said. Because you're good at your job. That wasn't meant as praise. It is, Gabriela replied. You just don't hear it that way. Rainwater streamed down the stone beside them. The closeness, the heat of their bodies, the isolation it stripped away pretense. You know who I am, Daniel said quietly. What I have to do, and you know who I am, Gabriela answered. What I won't stop doing. He looked at her then. Really looked. Why risk your life for this? She hesitated, then spoke. Because when I was younger, I watched my father beat a horse until it collapsed. No one stopped him. No one spoke up. I swore I would never be that silent. The words settled heavily between them. The law should have stopped him, Daniel said. It didn't. Silence again. Thunder rolled closer. You make it impossible, he said softly. Gabriela met his gaze. So do you. Their hands brushed to see and tell, then not. Daniel pulled back first, breath unsteady. This can't happen. It already is. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned in, the kiss brief, but charged, like striking flint. When they parted, the air felt different, dangerous. When the storm finally passed, they stood outside the canyon, reality creeping back in with the daylight. I can't protect you forever, Daniel said. I don't want protection, Gabriela replied. I want change. They mounted up without another word, and rode in opposite directions, both knowing something had shifted beyond repair. The storm had passed, the consequences had not. Word traveled fast in the desert, carried on dust and suspicion. By the time Daniel heard about Gabriela's next target, his chest felt tight enough to crack a rib. The Harper Ranch had long sat just outside the reach of consequence to wealthy, too connected, too careful about keeping cruelty out of sight. Complaints had come and gone. Evidence had dried up. The law, as it stood, had failed. Daniel stood in the jail office long after dark, staring at the map spread across his desk. He knew the pattern now. Night raid, clean cuts, 3 horses freed. And then she'd vanish again. He could stop her. He should stop her. Instead, he saddled his horse and rode. The moon was high when he reached the ridge overlooking the Harper corrals. Lantern light flickered below. Horses shifted restlessly, their low sounds carrying up the slope. Daniel dismounted and moved on foot, careful, quiet. Then he saw her. Gabriela slipped between shadows, like she belonged to them. Knife flashing once, twice, severing ropes with practiced ease. She murmured to the horses, hands steady, movements calm. Watching her felt like watching something inevitable. Gabriela, Daniel called softly. She froze. Slowly, she turned. Moonlight caught her face, her eyes widening just a fraction before settling into resolve. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. They stood, facing each other. The space between them filled with everything they hadn't said. The horses stamped and snorted, sensing tension. You knew I'd come, Daniel said. Yes, she replied. I hoped you wouldn't. He took a step closer. This ends tonight. Her expression softened, just for a moment. It never ends. That's the problem. Before Daniel could answer, shouting erupted from the ranch house. Lanterns flared brighter. Men poured into the yard. Rifles raised. Anger loud and ugly. She's here, someone yelled. Chaos broke loose. A shot rang out, splintering wood. Horses reared, eyes rolling. Gabriela moved instantly, cutting the last rope and swinging up onto a horse's back. Go, she shouted, slapping a rump and sending the animals surging toward the open gate. Another shot cracked the air. Daniel drew his gun not at Gabriela, but at the men charging forward. Stand down, he roared. Drop the weapons. They didn't listen. Daniel fired into the dirt, a warning shot that finally made them hesitate. This ranch is under investigation for animal cruelty, he said. Anyone interferes, I'll put them in chains. The men cursed, some lowering their rifles, others backing away. Gabriela stared at Daniel, shock and something like hope flashing across her face. You're choosing this, she said. I'm choosing what's right, he replied. The horses thundered past them, free at last, disappearing into the dark. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then Gabriela turned her horse. "I never wanted you caught in this," she said. Daniel stepped closer, voice low. "Then don't make me hunt you." Her eyes shone. "If I stay, they'll come after you. And if you leave, I keep moving," she said. "That's how this works." She leaned down, pressed her forehead briefly to his. It felt like a promise and a goodbye all at once. Then she kicked her heels and rode. By dawn, the Harper Ranch was shut down, the evidence undeniable, the animals gone. Daniel filed the reports himself, hands steady, heart heavy. Gabriela was nowhere to be found, but the desert remembered her, and so did he. Time moved differently after Gabriela disappeared. Days passed, then weeks, and Mesa Rosa settled into a quieter rhythm. Daniel kept busy to busy. The Harper Ranch case sent ripples through the territory. Inspections became stricter. Complaints were no longer ignored. Word spread that cruelty would no longer be hidden behind money or reputation. Some folks said the sheriff had gone soft. Others said he'd finally grown a spine. Daniel didn't care what they said. He enforced the law as it was written, but he also pushed where it bent too easily. He documented injuries. He listened to ranch hands, to travelers, to anyone who spoke for animals that could not. Each time he signed his name to a report, he thought of Gabriela riding into the dark, trusting him to do something with the choice he'd made. At night, he sometimes rode beyond town, following familiar trails that led nowhere. He told himself he wasn't looking for her. The desert, indifferent as ever, offered no answers. Months later, a shipment of horses arrived at a newly opened sanctuary north of Mesa Rosa. Healthy, calm, clearly rehabilitated. Daniel recognized the careful work immediately. He rode out to see them, under the excuse of an inspection. That was where he found her. Gabriela stood by the fence, sunlight catching in her hair, her hands resting on a chestnut mare's neck. She looked stronger, lighter, free in a way that made his chest ache. "You came," she said, without turning. "I always do," Daniel replied. She faced him then, a small smile breaking through her guarded expression. "I stopped stealing." He raised an eyebrow. "You disappeared." "I changed how I did things," she corrected. "Worked with people who wanted the same outcome. No more night rides. No more running." Daniel nodded slowly. "The law changed, I noticed," Gabriela said. "You kept your word, so, did you?" They stood in the quiet, the kind that didn't demand distance. Gabriela glanced at his badge. "You could arrest me. For the past." "I could," he said. "But the past already did its time." She searched his face, as if making sure this was real. "I didn't think you'd forgive me." "I didn't," Daniel admitted. "I understood you." That earned a soft laugh. "That's worse." "Probably," he said, smiling back. They walked along the fence together, talking about nothing and everything, about the sanctuary, about Mesa Roja, about how close they'd come to losing something neither had expected to find. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden vow, just two people who had survived their choices. As the sun dipped low, Gabriela stopped. "I won't run anymore." Daniel met her gaze. "Then, I won't chase." She stepped closer, resting her head against his chest, and for the first time, it didn't feel like borrowed time. It felt earned. Some stories ended in gunfire, or goodbye. Theirs ended in promise. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.